All right, well, today is all about scaling up STEM support in Australian universities. A couple of matters. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today. For me, that's in the Turrbal and Yurga people lands around the Brisbane area. Also acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people whose lands we may be meeting across this great country, and those who are amongst us today. I do pay respect to elders past and present. On the topic of Indigenous perspectives, I thought I just might mention this because it's something that was presented by an Indigenous academic about a year ago to me and quite a few other people here at QUT. Um, I feel that the topic that we're covering very much sits amongst the ecocentric worldview as opposed to the egocentric worldview, in that a lot of the talk, the discussions are all about helping others, working together for the betterment of our country and the people. I thought it makes sense that I just mention a few things about myself to put this into context. So, my name's Ian Lightbody. I'm the strategic lead for STEM support for learning at QUT. I've been here for about 12 years doing this job or something very close. Um, I'll mention that I was also the former general manager of Scouts Queensland and still a volunteer leader, have been for a long time. And some of the skills, the activities, and working with volunteers and managing volunteers is grounded in that sort of background, which will be important in this presentation. Prior to that, I was a math science teacher for 23 years, loved it. And I've done studies in education. I did a Master of Education by Research in Shared Leadership, which I guess explains perhaps some of the ways that I lead my team. I did an MBA, which is probably a little unusual for a school teacher, but that has put me in good stead in terms of leadership and management. And although I've just pulled out of my studies for personal reasons, I was studying a PhD on this topic for 7 years. So my interest in STEM, I think the story behind the story is actually worth telling and would also inform the presentation. So I was appointed because of my background in STEM subjects and leadership and management, as well as working with volunteers. Um, Soon after, as in a few years later, I was invited to put together some award nominations for an AAUT team award, and we won. We won that award, and we went on to win another national award and two international awards, which we're very proud of. But that actually sparked the interest because I didn't actually, or we didn't know too much about what was happening in the sector. And if we'd been recognised doing sector leading work, I was wondering, what do other people do and why do they do it? So we began starting to reach out and sharing knowledge. The STEM Education Network started way back then, which led to the interest in my PhD. And this is, I guess, one of those chances to share what I've picked up based on those studies. And just a little background on QUT. We are based in Brisbane. We have over 50,000 students and about 4,500 staff. And we have two campuses in Brisbane, as well as, of course, a lot of studies that happen online. The presentation is all about scaling up STEM support, and a little note about that in a moment. I'm trying to blend in some research, particularly my research, and also practice that I've seen, but also that we have done here at QUT. I'll be using some examples, mostly QUT examples, and invite any questions and discussions towards the end. On that point, and Sky, one of my colleagues, is assisting me today. We should have the chat. So the chat is there for you to put in comments. Please feel free to add comments as you go. It might be an idea that comes to mind. Um, the questions should go into a Q&A spot that's, I hope, visible to you. Okay, the topic. Start by saying that the research that I did was on what, how, and why STEM support is provided in Australian universities, but also residential colleges. That was almost like an afterthought, but it was an important afterthought. QT doesn't have, formally, it doesn't have a residential college system, but we do have students who are in colleges, and I know that that's very important in many universities. And colleges provide STEM support, academic support. The request actually came via Ken. He said, could you run a workshop on math support, scaling up math support? Because I know a lot of you will have a maths focus. But in terms of scaling up support, and you'll see why, I felt that, in fact, adding it or extending that to STEM discipline areas rather than just the maths was actually an important piece of the presentation. And I'll move on to that in a moment. Bit like the acknowledgement of country, I'd like to acknowledge that there's an awful lot of really good work happening out there, and it's been a joy to pick up ideas and to transform those into something that we could use within my university. There's a lot of work happening in peer programs. We have a very active peer program ourselves. The peer assisted study session model has been around for a long time. We don't use it, but we've certainly borrowed or pinched some of the ideas, which you'll hear about in a moment. I think there's a lot of very good work happening there. Um, Years ago, RMIT had a program for business students called SLAMs. I believe that doesn't exist anymore, but we developed a lot of our ideas on peer programs based on that model. STEM enrichment, we do as much as we can. Amongst us, we've got David Butler, who does amazing work at the University of Adelaide on enrichment. And if you're interested, I'm sure that David would be able to answer those questions, but he's also got quite a bit of material online that is visible. Um, University-wide research, there's a lot of it. I think that there's a lot of work being done in learning centres. So whether they be maths learning centres or a centre within, say, the library in some universities, that's well documented as a good model. We've created a lot of other resources ourselves. You'll hear about the volunteering side of how we operate, and also learning resources. And then there's a lot of research. I think that, I mean, amongst the pile of research, we've been heavily influenced by the work of Karen Nelson, Sally Kiff, John Clark, all formerly from QT, and Ella Kahu from New Zealand on first year experience and transition pedagogy and the educational interface, which came out years ago now. I feel like this next slide, I'm actually going to show you what the end result is. This is like our summary slide. I think that the key points I'm going to make are about having multiple approaches, having techniques that are efficient and effective. Sometimes they mean different things. We talk about economies of scale and scope, having coordinated and integrated approaches to do things at scale. I think it is important to not lose sight of the fact that we're trying to, or at least we're trying to provide support to groups as well as individuals, and that it becomes a blend of peer support, specialist staff, learning resources, and also outsourcing. Just make a comment. I'm going to share the video recording of this presentation as well as the slides. So just to be aware that that's probably coming out tomorrow, but I'll hand those on. So we'll delve into some of these topics. In my research, this was in the survey that I ran, which was very well, that had a good response rate. I asked people, what are the reasons for STEM support? and 98% of all of the respondents said that it was about helping students academically, that is content and or skills, but also building academic confidence, which is sometimes not well known by people outside of our field, but it's a very important aspect, I think, of what we do. Also, equal pegging at 95%. To ensure that students coming to university have a high quality experience and to improve university retention rates. Once students commit to study, um, with some exceptions, it's always um, encouraging that we can support students to be successful. Student success is a key term that we certainly use at QT. Um, These were also fairly highly rated to assist students to become independent learners. That term could be contested, so self-managed learners might be a better term to use, but also to encourage help-seeking behaviour, which is not always natural for students. On top of those responses, particularly through my interviews, we know, and also because of more recent changes to the sector, there's a need for legislative compliance. Um, we think that also the universities have the provision of support as part of the value proposition, or they should, and to enhance the student satisfaction, so the student experience. I'll put up I'm not going to read these to you, but these are some quotes out of the interviews that I performed with quite a few people within the sector. You'll see I've highlighted, I think, the key ideas. Care for students comes up. Um, the financial aspect of running a business, which is not necessarily my view, but um, universities need to think of the business side of running the enterprise. Um, the better student experience is up there, as well as a visible sign that we're actually doing something for students, whether students actually pursue that and take on the support or not. I think one of the things that has come through in many different ways, and certainly it's something that we subscribe to at QT, is that we're here to support all students. And in fact, if you run remedial programs, that often it's problematic because students who might need remedial support won't come because of the stigma, but also that if you make support available to all and it's pitched in that way, that in fact you get better outcomes for all and that people actually deserve the support that is available. Um, the idea of social learning, so social constructivist approach to learning, comes through as a fairly significant theme. It's one of only a number of different approaches to learning, of course. Um, I could spend many hours talking about educational theory, but I'll just give it a light touch here to say that we take on board those ideas about students helping students, and in fact, staff helping students. The pass model has these things sort of really embedded in their structure of students helping others, particularly those with experience helping those that are not. If I go to our data, I'd say that of the STEM support that we provide, about two-thirds of the students that we see are actually commencing students or first-year students, however you want to define that. Now we're starting to get into, I guess, some of the nitty-gritty. I mentioned earlier that I think that one important aspect on how to provide support at scale is to know what the options are. Um, a lot of universities don't run all of these options. We do, um, but it's something to consider. So the one-to-one consultations for us primarily with staff, but we do have a model that allows students to help other students one-to-one. The study session model, drop-in support, which can be one-to-one support or it can be small groups, but it's non-bookable for us. The ability to run workshops, especially to scale up support when we identify a need. That's a common approach used across universities. The provision of learning resources, something that's ramping up a lot within our space, where we create resources or find resources that will help students, and most of them are online, but we do have some physical resources like anatomy models and chemical molecular model kits, and the outsourcing of support. And I think Studiosity takes the main bulk of that sort of support. We acknowledge that if we talk about Studiosity, that is only for really foundational maths and foundational science. Its scope is not really beyond that. When designing programs, we start to have a matching exercise because if they are the options on how support can be provided, then you've got decisions on where. So dedicated space is a really nice thing. General learning spaces are used certainly by us as well. Libraries are a common place to find support, and online, a lot of online support, particularly after COVID, where we had to go online. And for most people, that's a model that we've continued with in some form or other. The question of who it's for comes into play. Identifying cohorts is super important, that we don't just provide support on an ad hoc basis, that we actually have a strategy and we identify where need exists. We recruit staff on that need, and that also includes the recruitment of paid students and volunteers. And we, like all other universities, work out the students that would benefit from the support. And then who provides the support? We'll go into that one a little bit further. So if we're talking about how to scale up support, one way to consider this is really to look at the economy of scale, producing more of the same service. So saving costs. I'm talking about economic costs, not necessarily financial. But the way that I've found within the sector that are common on how to provide services at scale by reproducing that service is to group students with similar needs. I know a lot of people spend a lot of time looking at data and getting intelligence from their university to find out what those needs are and to um, provide support that's en masse to those groups, to have a coordinated workforce and functions that allow that to happen, to be connected within the university as well as internally connected, and have, of course, demonstrated results. So all of that requires very much integrated and coordinated methods or models. If I use the QT system, I won't go into detail, but we have a lot of our efforts go into recording data to be embedded or aligned with the faculty structure. So my staff have aligned within faculties, and to run a university-wide model. We collect a lot of data. On the continuum of individual support to group support, to scale up support is usually down this end to provide group support. There are ways that we can provide individual support at scale, but I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. The other way to economize is the economies of scope, where you can group like or different services together in some form or other. So the key indicators when I have looked into the sector is where there's multiple support services that might come under a common banner, or in the same place, could be in the library. To have a coordinated workforce and functions that allow that to happen is also an indicator, and that type of support also has to be connected in with faculty structures and have demonstrated results. Sorry, I am using QT language. I'm acutely aware that almost translations required into other universities. I hope you forgive me. Again, the QT model allows us to group different types of services together. And I think the three diagrams I'm going to show you simplify this, but I guess hit home the point I'm trying to make. The first is the different types of services that we operate and offer within STEM support. And there's more than that, but I'm just giving you a model to go with, is that the consultations, the workshops, the learning resources, and the learning communities, online learning communities that we offer are within one package of STEM support. So they are different services, but they're bundled together, and we communicate that to staff and students. Um, the next is that we have extended what is traditionally a focus on math support. And in some universities, when I was doing this study, I could only find math support being offered, or maths and stats, and then the occasional science support and a little bit of IT and maybe one or two engineering types of support structures that are dedicated to those STEM areas, acknowledging that the past model does extend across and far beyond STEM. It's a model that's a little bit different, but also a very good example of how to have an economy of scope. If we take our structure one level up, we provide STEM support, but my colleagues, L&L is language and learning, and careers support, and our retention team, we work collaboratively as a student success team. Um, in fact, I'm cutting ourselves short because it's actually student success and teaching advancement. So there's a wider span of collaboration that occurs within our learning and teaching unit. There's another picture of Sky. Um, I've mentioned a few times to have a coordinated and integrated model is a key to really scaling STEM support or scaling math support. When I was doing an exploration of what's out there, it was very common to have a coordinator or a manager, and in some cases managers, because actually take PASS as an example. PASS could be coordinated by one manager, and a maths learning center could be coordinated by another manager or equivalent role, and that they could be different, could be split. There was almost always, in fact, no, 100%, all universities that provide STEM support, which was 39 out of 41 universities who don't have any STEM, there was always a combination of having specialist staff somewhere and students helping students somewhere, usually the past model. I'll add to that list, though, that there are a few of us, and we're not the only university, who have volunteers. We have student volunteers. We have a very mature peer program model at QT, and STEM support is the largest of those programs. So at QT, that's our current status of paid staff, including paid students. And we have, I think I'm correct in saying, 128 volunteers at present. Not all active, but it's the team and expertise that we draw upon. Okay, so I'd like to show you how we put this puzzle together at QT, and it's not a complete picture, but STEM support, along with language and learning, careers, and student retention, collectively are student success. And we are only half of really what the team is, which is also teaching advancement, helping academic staff to do a really good job. We collaborate and work in partnership with library faculties, the QT College, which offers diploma courses as well as courses for students that might be coming from overseas. We've got the Ujaru unit, which is our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander support unit, QT International and Counselling, and then High Q, which is our front of they send people our way. They run the inquiries for QT. So we're connected. We have a lot of contact and work closely with all of those and actually many other groups too. This is I guess, for your information, this is a student-facing slide. Those links won't work for you, I'm afraid, but this shows, I guess, what we let students know. There are many other ways, but this is just a bit of a summary. So we fall under study support along with language and learning and STEM support. At a glance, that's my team. So they are STEM educators. There are three that are senior STEM educators, and reference to our paid students there. So in delving into how not just QT, but at most universities, consultations, we see this as a fairly important service, particularly to help complex and high need students. One-to-one support is economically expensive to run, but it's important. Drop-in support is something, in fact, that's what the picture is. We've got a learning hub. It's a learning space where we have a big roster of volunteers and some staff as well. So students can come in at a non-bookable time. They can just come in when that expertise is available. And a lot of other universities do have a similar sort of process, but probably not to the magnitude that we run. And I'll show you a couple of little secrets as to how that works in a moment. Study sessions, peer-assisted study sessions is the most popular across Australia. I think every other university runs it. Workshops, I mentioned before, learning resources, typically in a learning management system to have resources that we would send students to. We do have an online community using Teams and Studiosity, I've already mentioned. So that's an overview of really what that we do at QT. And I think that if you just reflect on your own universities, you'll probably be able to tick quite a few of those boxes, if not all of them. Um, when we talk about STEM support, one thing that surprises some people is just the scope of STEM support. So we initially began STEM support as a merger of a maths, science, and an IT support service into one. And then over time, that has evolved into a university-wide program. Science, engineering, and health are the largest of our faculties for STEM support. But you'll notice examples, and there's more than what are listed there, but they are some of the topics that STEM support would cover. And it does mean that in terms of economies of scope, we're able to provide support across the university. So there are common needs. So there are some workshops, for example, we run at the start of semesters where we know that a workshop is applicable to people from this faculty course and another different faculty and course. So we market, promote to a wider cross-section of the university rather than a narrow focus on what students in one course would do or one faculty would do. I think some of you might have heard me say previously that we're going to share this with the sector for free. Um, we're not quite at that point anymore, but we're getting closer. So we have a story here. Many years ago, I'm thinking 8 or 9 years ago, a group of students doing a capstone unit in IT came to my colleague, my senior STEM educator, and said, have you got a problem that we could solve with an IT solution to write some code and to create, for a project? And he said roster, because if you got more than 100 volunteers and they're all keen to help at different times of the week, with lots of different expertise, it's really hard to come up with a timetable that spreads the expertise efficiently. And then it's static. So as soon as somebody's on placement or has a flat tire, doesn't work. So they went away and they came back with some a program, software that did the job. Um, and we said, thank you very much. That looks really nice. One of our volunteers saw it and said, oh, I think I could do better than that. He went away, came back as part of his just a holiday project and said, what about this? And we were gobsmacked. We thought, this is amazing. You're a genius. Uh, we actually employed him and he gifted it to QT. So he shared the code and said, this is yours, all legal and above board. Um, it took a year for us to make it compliant with QT systems. Now it is a QT system, and that's almost like an unheard story of software becoming a corporate system. We still work on it. We still employ students to work on it. But what it means is that we have a back end where our volunteers, 128, they don't all work on the drop-in support, which is what this is aimed to do. But what they do is they tell us their expertise, their availability, and my team push a few buttons and it generates a roster. And we can modify it. And as students aren't able to provide support in drop-in in our learning hubs, they can go in and say, I'm not available, and it comes off the roster. The roster is different week to week. So it assumes somebody will be here for the semester. From week 2 to week 13, we have a 13-week semester. But from the front end, what I'm not showing you, but I could show you the live version, is that you can type in a unit or a subject. You can type in a skill. You can look for our streams, what we call streams, which are groups of their subject areas. And it will show you all of the people with that expertise. For the purpose of the demonstration, I've typed in CAB 202, which is one of our most popular units. It's an IT unit, coding unit, as well as one of the education units. So you'll see that our two campuses show up. And if we put in some other request, the filters would come up with the information to show when we have somebody that can help you. So this has been instrumental in meaning that we can actually run a lot of support using mostly our volunteer team. You might see a couple of study sessions in there too, but it is not on that filter, but it is a great way. We are going to do some work to make it more user-friendly on smartphones, hopefully in the month of November. And then fingers crossed, if you're interested in taking the code and making it your own, then hopefully next year that will be a reality. To give you an idea of the large scale that we're operating for this model, this is a truncated graph because we can't fit it all in. So this is the semester one data from drop-in support only. No workshops, no study sessions, it's just drop-in. And we had 150 units supported by a volunteer team of 120 peer learning facilitators and others. 463 unique students, 1,032 interactions. So the graph actually goes on and on and on. By quartile, so this is by unit. So all of those units or subjects, we have high demand units. Usually the top 2 units take about 1 quartile of the population. The next quartile is about 5 or 6 units usually. Then the third quartile is about 30 units, and the fourth quartile is about 100 and something. Um, and it shows you that what we're able to do is use all of the expertise within our volunteer team to create a huge scope of support across all STEM subjects. Different topic related, but one of the things we did years ago now is talk about the different levels of support and the different services. I'm calling this a tiered service model. That can be misleading because I'm not talking about a typical tier service model where somebody who needs some sort of service has to go to self-serve and then gets bumped up to tier one, then to tier two, then to tier three, where tier three is um, individualized one-on-one support. What this really means is that there are some things that our students, and I know this applies to all of the other universities that I've actually studied, is that there are learning resources that are self-serve. You can just go in and find it yourself at any time. And ideally, ideally that would be where most students would get help. Large group support is tier one. Greater span in terms of the number of people that you can support, and it goes up. Based on that model, I did some research and asked for estimates from all of the different people from universities on how many people they thought would be accessing different levels of support. And I had a lot more responses than this, but I did see most universities had that pyramid. So um, the high the high need students would be able to get one-to-one support in smaller numbers, but it was there, and it was important not to lose that. Through to learning resources that you would hope would be a lot of students accessing, but it wasn't always the case. You'll see one example there where there's no learning resources. Maybe the person who responded to my survey didn't know of any, but what this showed me is that some universities had thoughtfully gone through and actually created a model that provided as much support to as many people as possible, whilst also providing tailored and very specific support to students who needed it. And there is, I know, one color error in that bottom row. I'm sorry for that. But it's something which I think that I think it would be valuable to reflect on your own university as to uh, where the support lies in terms of the tiered service model. Because if you're a university where learning resources are not easily accessible or they're not to a level where a lot of students can actually benefit, then that might be something to address. Likewise, and I know that not necessarily in STEM support, but other areas of our university, years ago, there was a lot of effort put into consultations. Right, it was all about helping one student at a time, which is great for the student, but it does mean that support is not available to a large number of people. It's certainly very expensive to try and operate that way. Um, Also, quite a few years ago, and I've just raised this with my team, that I'd like us to revisit what's called a program logic model. Program logic model has, I think, two significant values, and what we did came out of the Kellogg's Foundation. So in the United States, the Kellogg Foundation gives away money to worthy causes, and quite often it's very hard to measure the impact because the impact might be decades after some sort of intervention. Or it might be something that you really just can't measure. And I know that that's been a challenge in our part of education. The idea is that program logic model is where you get a lot of people to contribute who are knowledgeable on what you're trying to achieve to work out what are the inputs and the activities as planned work, and then to look at what you're trying to achieve. So the intended results, what are the immediate outputs, what are the outcomes, and the impact. We built on this model and also added what are the assumptions to do what we do, and also look at the data that we collect and how does that inform our program. This is the model. It has been modified, refined since those early days as part of my research, because I was trying to look at all the different aspects of the inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact that I could see. And this resonated with the work that we'd done earlier. And I thought that this was a very good starting point for us because it meant that my team at the time, but also all of the key stakeholders, had a very clear idea of what we were doing, how we were doing it, and why we were doing it. There's a list of assumptions there, and also I'll talk about feedback loop in a moment, but we collect a lot of data and that informs our practice. So this is, I think, a very, very valuable exercise to go through, particularly when you're um, at the early stage of a new model, or in our case, you've had tweaks and you want to just check to make sure that we're doing things as well in what we think the best way is. So we're going to revisit this at the start of next year. The other value of program logic modeling, just to put it out there, and this is not well accepted, is that it can be used for evaluation. And the idea is that you come up with what is the program logic and you compare reality with logic and you see, are we close? And if there's anything, quite often you don't have to do the entire program, you pick out one element. And I know that Sky's heard me talk about this a few times. Um, the one thing I remember as a really good example was our communications. So in the activities that we perform, we promote services. There we are, C2, services promoted to relevant audiences, students and staff. We didn't quite know what that meant. So we asked some experts within QT, what should we be doing, do you think? And they said three. You've got to promote three times, three different modes of delivery so that the message gets heard and people act. Anyway, might be a takeaway. This is probably a little bit easier to follow, and it's certainly something that I think is important and has made a big difference to what we do at QT. And I will say I haven't heard too much about this type of approach elsewhere. So maybe this is something that's worth looking into. Um, this is a cycle, feedback loop that we use. Most people know what happens in the teaching aspects of a university. I'll start at the teaching point. Could start anywhere because it is a cycle or a loop. We identify learning needs based on what is taught, what is covered within the curriculum. We reach out to students and tell them what's on, and then we provide those activities. And that's just a very brief overview of what we do. We do lots of other things too. With all of our activities, collecting data is a big deal. We collect a lot of data and we do our very best to make sure that it's clean data and that it's complete. That data in all its different forms is used to feed back to the academic teaching staff. We don't report on individual students. We report on cohorts, and that often means that there can be because we have embedded staff within faculties, it can lead to very quick responses to issues. So there might be a new assignment that the students don't really understand, and within 24 hours, we have the ability to let that academic know that there's an issue and they can do something about it. And we've had that happen many times over. It also, that data informs our own practice. So it gives us real hard evidence on what is working, what could be improved, and what we might do to plan for the future. Strategies. These are student success strategies. So they're actually from an old model of who we used to be, but we still apply these, and this is beyond STEM support. One is that we use the partnership model heavily, and it's not lip service. So when we talk about working in partnership with students, there are many activities where students will lead the activity and we will support them. There are many activities where we'll have staff leading the activity and we have students supporting them. It's not one or the other, and we value the student voice heavily. So we have a student executive, and we have times when we celebrate the semester, for example, but we also have input, feedback from students that helps us plan, and that happens through the semester. We partner with faculties. Our careers team will partner with industry. Next, and again, this is not uncommon. I think that most universities would agree that this is something that you would do, that we provide support that's curriculum aligned. Otherwise, it's fairly meaningless, but it's important to keep sight of that. Our support is accessible and inclusive, and that's in language as well as the physical arrangements, timely and relevant, which I'll just throw something out there. One of the things that I think is important is to run timely and obviously relevant support. But timely support means that there are workshops, for example, that we run in weeks 5 and 6, but we don't run at any other time of the semester because our data and our feedback that we've got and intelligence from unit coordinators will tell us that there are particular points within a semester that are critical to provide support, but not at other times. So we don't try and run things every week. There are exceptions to that where that has been identified as a need, but I know that some universities struggle with that idea. And in fact, a conversation, I won't go into the detail, not embarrassing anyone, but they talk about a service that gets high numbers at the start of the semester and then it tapers off. We see that too, but we then don't necessarily have to run workshops when it tapers off. But we do know that probably at the end of the semester, it'll ramp up again, assessment driven. A couple of mindsets that sit behind what we do. So one is that we believe everyone deserves the opportunity to uh, complete their degree, and that might not fit nicely with some university people who work on a Darwinistic approach of if you complete your degree, you deserve it. I think that there's acknowledgement, whether we use this language or not, but students can come into university being dependent learners, dependent on a teacher. Um, we're trying to help students to be independent learners, and I mean self-managed, not solo learners, but to be independent, to self-manage their learning, to be an adult learner, and then to also be interdependent, so they help each other, collaborative learning. Um, that's not necessarily a next step, it's just that something else that's important. Growth mindset as opposed to fixed mindset. We believe that there's a shared responsibility for learning, and I was encouraged that in the interviews that I had with people from other universities, that was a common theme, as was growth mindset, in fact. We have a strength-based approach. We avoid deficit language, which is a challenge when quite often the government uh, presents legislation that is very much full of deficit language, but nevertheless, it's something we avoid. And the partnership model I've already mentioned. In concluding, I'd just like to present a few things that I think are changing. One is funding. I don't know about you, but everyone I talk to seems to be going, oh, unbelievable. We're having more cuts, more cuts, more cuts. And we've had six budget cuts in a year, six budget cuts in successive years. Not nice. We know that there's changes to the student services amenities fee arrangements, where 40% will go to student-led organisations. My argument is I have a student-led organisation, but that hasn't gone anywhere, and that we know that HEP is also changing to a needs-based funding model, which means that there are changes looming for next year. All of those things also define that scaling math support, STEM support is critical, doing more with less. Legislative changes, not going to go into detail, but they need to have student support policies and to comply with legislation I think is something that a lot of universities aren't addressing. And that's something that a lot of colleagues have told me that they can't see that these budget cuts, for example, are actually allowing us to support students um, identified having a need, but that's where we're currently at. So that's a concern. And I thought I'd present this slide. I mean, it'd be easy for me to present lots of nice graphs of things that are going well, but this is something which struck me over the course of time. This is the drop-in support. Workshop numbers don't follow this pattern, but we've seen a tapering off of people coming for drop-in support. I'd like you to think if you've seen anything like this yourself. I'm not overly concerned. I think it's a change, not a change away from support. It's a change in the way students are accessing support and studying. My take on it is that a lot of students are doing more online supports. They don't come on campus and drop in. If they do, a colleague of mine said he walked through the library and noticed that 50% of the students had two screens up and they're using Copilot or ChatGPT to help them study, and they were doing something else on the other one. Hopefully, not anything to do with academic misconduct, but that there was a change. So some of our other services are doing well, and we think that there's a move to using learning resources and other things. So in summary, just wrapping things up, I think the multiple approaches model, as well as looking very carefully at what can be done to make things more effective and efficient, providing group and individual support, and that combination of peer support, specialist staff, learning resources, and outsourcing is key. For what it's worth, I'm going to put up some of the um, presentations. These are, I think they're all poster papers, but they are very much on topic. I haven't published much recently because I've been trying to get a PhD done, but pulled out, so now I've got more time. Any questions? And I'd like to try and start the poll if I can. Or Sky, can you start the poll? It's just feedback. It's asking how the presentation went and asking for any questions. Sky, can you see any questions?
Yes, we've had a few questions come in, and I've got a couple in the chat. From the This might go back a few topics, but in the Q&A, we've got, let's see, six or seven, and we might step them through. So first of all, Sid asked what study sessions look like, and I think it was also backed up by David. He also wants to know what a study session consists of.
It will depend on who you ask. So if you ask somebody from the past community, they'll talk about their past workshops being study sessions, peer-assisted study sessions. We've borrowed that terminology a bit, and for us, it means a range of things. So it's almost like a mini workshop, student-led usually. So it could be a paid student or a volunteer student, um, but it's usually a small group and it's on a topic as opposed to our normal drop-in support, which can be on anything. And a workshop is like a pre-planned approach to providing support. Study sessions tend to be a case of students turning up and then working together with the support of, it's often within the learning hubs, doesn't need to be, but they usually create their own agenda when they meet, if you like. It's not teacher-led. I'm using that term teacher very broadly. I hope that answers the question. The training.
Fantastic. We've got a question from David about the roster. There was a bit of interest in the roster that we use, actually. So, how do you tell the students when specific expertise is available? It might have been answered. And then also Linda asked a question about the back end support, whether there's IT support for the system and how it gets developed.
To let students know when expertise is available, there's a multi-pronged approach. So that means that if we have a STEM educator who is working specifically with a cohort, they will quite often bring up the roster, put in the filters, and say, if you do this, that's what you see, and that's when you can drop in. Um, we also have student-facing staff, can be students, student staff, could be our regular staff, our core staff, who will also use the roster as a point of reference. So, for example, the retention team, they're doing outbound calls, they're talking to a student who needs some sort of STEM support. They will open up the roster and say, hey, look, there's somebody who's on tomorrow at 2. Would you be able to go? So the student themselves may not see the roster, but they'll be informed by a staff member on what's available. Um, so there are other things put into the roster as well that are timetabled or announced in some way that it's at a specific time. But it's almost think of any way that you can tell people how we provide support, and we'll attempt to do it. Back end. Oh, David?
Fantastic.
Can I just clarify that? So can a student, without talking to anyone, find out when they can talk to someone?
Yes. So
And how
we
do they
have
know
them.
how to do that?
So through the what we call the HiQ website, so the intranet, there are links to the roster directly. So something says there are students available Monday to Friday between these times on a roster. Click here to find out. We can also do filters so that they will not have to do the filtering themselves, but they're able to click and it'll bring up the expertise that they're looking for. On the question of IT support, I think we have the advantage of having almost like an in-house team of IT specialists. We do employ a student, we train them up. We're about to employ somebody. We're on that transition point, so we'll train someone up. So the next person or the person currently in there will graduate so that they're familiar with the systems and yeah, it's well documented so that we'll have this flow of students coming through. So it's effectively working. It's a matter of maintaining it.
We've got a bunch of questions. David has asked a whole lot of questions, really interesting ones, but some people have backed that up and asked the same questions in the chat as well. So can you speak really briefly about the type of training and supervision that the volunteer team gets, the PLS?
Yes, certainly. Training. So there's the initial training. We have a peer programs team. Um, so we've developed training modules that people. So we recruit. Some people come to us and say, "Can we join?" We check that they have a sound knowledge of the units or the topics. Then they need to do the mandatory training and also sign the mutual agreement. The training that they need to do, we've got some online training that they do, hopefully prior to turning up to a big training day at the start of each semester. That's particularly for commencing peer learning facilitators. Um, we have some program-specific training as well as some more generic training. We also have training that is for more advanced peer learning facilitators. So if you've been here for a semester or longer, then you can come back and do the next level of training. It's not mandatory, but a lot of people do it because they love it. And I also run some special sessions on that day. Not everyone turns up because they're overseas or on holiday still, so we do catch-up training as well. On top of that, we run additional professional development opportunities. Somebody from our careers team has just run the third iteration of a how to convert your volunteer time into something that's meaningful in a resume. Um, so there's other things that are in the training side of it, but training for the role, it's online and the on-campus day for most people.
Thanks, Ian. So I'll go to a question of Ken's, which is at a sort of a level up from the practicalities, I think. So he says, you mentioned if you pitch support as being for all students, you get a better outcome for everyone. So Ken would like you to just expand on that idea.
I'm feeling that there's two areas of the research that need to be presented for a full picture, and we probably don't have the time. But I'd say that there's a couple of things. If we talk about the personas of students, which is an area of study that people on my team have done, it depends on the student. But one type of student who might be a surface learner and may not have the time to commit to further, to get into their studies fully. If they're struggling, maybe it's because of work commitments or family or health or lots of reasons. If they're struggling, they may feel that coming and asking for help is just not in their mindset, that there's also a potential for a stigma of having remedial support. Um, going through school, sometimes there's a stigma attached to remedial support. And for those students, that might actually be a barrier. It's the very student you really would like to be, assisted by the support that we can provide, but that can be a problem. It also means that if there is no barrier from that perspective, that it's support for all, then the students that aren't struggling or necessarily struggling with a particular piece of their learning can help others. So this idea of social constructivist approach, so collaborative learning, is very beneficial if you've got the wider audience coming to support. So we've seen that, and I think it was a surprise many years ago when we first looked at the types of GPAs that students were getting who were coming to support. And we were getting a lot of students, not as many students as those that might be on that borderline struggling, but we had quite a few students who were getting stellar GPAs. So, 6.5 and higher on a 7-point scale. We've had success stories where a student has come for support, really got into it, loved it, become a volunteer, become a paid student, ended up going into academia, becoming a lecturer. There's a lot of really great success stories based on having the holistic approach on having students come along.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Now,
I am aware that we're at time. I'm quite
we
happy
are
to
definitely at
stay,
time.
but if you do need to head off, absolutely understand. And I will be sending the recording and the PowerPoint in a day or two.
All right.
Bye.
Well, maybe just a couple of more practical questions. So with the specialist staff, you've got 8 specialist paid staff. How much time do they spend, Ian, how much time do we spend each week with students? And what are we doing when we're not with students? And that's backed onto a question of what does a consultation look like?
Sky, with you in the room, I'd be silly to answer that question. Sky, in 60 seconds, can you answer the question?
I can probably answer with less than 60 seconds. Okay, cool. So look, in my calendar, I put space for about 3 one-to-one student consults a week. They don't always all get booked out. I probably run 2 workshops during the week, which have been, an average week that have been organized with specific units. We've gone in, had good conversations with the unit coordinator about places that there's pain points where you've got a unit, large cohort, maybe a lot of students failed in the previous year. And so we look at the bespoke support that needs to to happen. So there's a lot of conversations in embedding that lead to producing what will be maybe a workshop and a collection of videos. So there's lots of other work that we do that are that's embedding. Apart from sitting down with students, I had 60 seconds, didn't I? What do? We run outreach activities like STEMantics, which is fun STEM stuff to try and promote our services. We're doing lots of communicating with staff. We have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 channels from which requests can come in for help from students, from staff, and we've got to get them to the right places. We've got to hook staff up with the right volunteers, student who's done that unit. We're also trying to always rebuild and improve our systems, and all the STEM educators are involved in that work. There's lots of admin time that's involved in, just recording journal notes for consultations, making sure that people get referrals to counselling or to some other service when when a student's in distress or has a particular need. So there's lots of other work that's not just sitting down helping someone with maths, that the specialist staff get to do. So it's a fun gig, and it's a really good role that that Ian's been involved in creating, that serves the need. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Sky.
No worries. All right. Now, I think, okay. Oh, Phil's thrown in, how long are the one-to-ones? One-to-one consultations?
Sky, what's your average consultation time?
They're meant to be 45 minutes. I don't get out under an hour mostly. Sometimes there is a rare situation where a student's in desperate need. It's not just about they need help with their maths or their assignments, due in an hour. But we also have a model. So it's staff like me. We do an hour or so, 45 minutes, and we have a separate model that we've built, which is for our volunteer team doing essentially one-to-one consultations, and they're shorter, they're 30 minutes. And we have special training for them to actually be able to do that online. The system that we've built some safety in to get that happening.
I might wrap things up. Look, thank you so much, Sky. Thanks for helping. All the great questions. I hope that's been of value. I hope the presentation's been of value. If not new ideas, it might also reaffirm some of the things that you're doing, because that's one of the aspects that I enjoyed, is to go, oh, we're not the only people that do that. That's good to hear. And the sharing of ideas, we're always picking up things that we can always do better. And I'd encourage the same to happen in the future. Ken, thanks for the invitation. Really appreciate the time to share. See you all. Bye.